All right, so we're diving into Early Retirement Extreme today.
Oh, yeah, this is a good one.
It is by Jacob Lund Fisker.
Hmm.
I think this is going to be perfect for, anybody out there who is maybe looking for some different ways to think about retirement,
Absolutely.
especially if, kind of that simpler living and that self-sufficiency thing is appealing.
Yeah, that resonates with you.
So we're going to basically, give everybody like the VIP tour of all the big ideas in this book.
Yet you don't even have to read
I
it.
don't have to read the whole thing.
Yeah.
So, when I was first kind of looking into this,
Yeah.
one of the things that I thought was really interesting was that, it's not just about like pinching pennies.
Right.
He really kind of pushes this idea of like, viewing your life as a system.
Well, that's what's so interesting about Fisker's approach. It's not just about being frugal for the sake of it.
Yeah.
He wants you to think about your whole life as a system,
Yeah.
your finances, your time, your skills, everything. And then you figure out how to, optimize all those different elements so you can create a life that's more fulfilling, more sustainable.
Okay, yeah, but life as a system, I mean, that kind of sounds a little bit like, corporate jargon. Like, what does that actually mean for like, me just like living my everyday life?
Well, imagine you're trying to drive a car,
Mm-hmm.
but you've got the parking brake on.
Oh, okay.
You'd waste a lot of fuel. You'd put a lot of unnecessary strain on the engine. And that's kind of how Fisker sees a lot of us living our lives. We have these habits, these expenses, these commitments that are just draining our energy and our resources without really giving us much back.
Mm-hmm.
He calls them like metaphorical breaks.
Mm.
And he challenges us to figure out what those breaks are in our own lives.
Okay.
Release them and let our lives run a little more smoothly. Yeah.
So it's not just about, like saving money. It's about like streamlining to get like more out at everything.
Exactly. More bang for your buck, right. But of course, money does come into it.
Mm-hmm.
Fisker makes this really bold claim that saving 75 to 80% of your income,
Whoa.
not only possible, but it can get you to retirement in just 5 to 10 years.
5 to 10 years. Okay, 80% though. That's intense. I mean, is he saying we all need to become like off-the-grid hermits or something?
Not quite. It's more about shifting from spending without thinking to what he calls value-based living. And you think about it. If you can live comfortably on, let's say, $10,000 a year,
Mm-hmm.
you only need $250,000 to be financially independent. That's just 25 times your annual expenses, which, probably feels a lot more attainable than, the millions that you hear about in traditional retirement advice.
Okay, so I see the logic there, but how do you actually get to that point?
Yeah.
Like realistically, I mean, how can you save that much without feeling like you're just like constantly, depriving yourself? And I'm guessing that's where this whole like, extreme frugality thing comes in.
You got it. Fisker really dives deep into extreme frugality. But the cool thing is, his approach is really about making sure your spending matches what really matters to you.
Okay.
It's not about being cheap just for the sake of being cheap. It's more like asking yourself, does this thing I'm about to buy actually make my life better? Or am I just kind of caught up in this cycle of always wanting more stuff?
So less deprivation and more about just being like mindful, intentional with your money.
Exactly. Instead of buying a ton of stuff you might not even need, the idea is to buy less, but buy better.
Yeah.
And it goes beyond just stuff, It's also about investing in experiences.
Yeah.
Investing in your own personal growth, things that bring you lasting satisfaction. And this is where he brings in this idea of self-sufficiency, which is a big part of his philosophy.
Oh, now this is where it gets really interesting for me because I've always been kind of curious about like, learning those more practical skills, like that whole hands-on thing. And I know that's a big focus in the book, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like cooking, repairs, even gardening. It's like a back to basics kind of approach in a way.
Yeah.
Fisker argues that when we learn to do those things for ourselves, we become less reliant on, outside systems, more self-reliant. And naturally, that saves us a ton of money.
Okay.
I mean, think about it. If you become like a whiz in the kitchen, you don't have to order takeout all the time.
Right.
And if you can handle like basic car repairs yourself,
Yeah.
you're not going to spend as much on mechanics.
Suddenly 80% doesn't sound quite as impossible.
Aye.
But all this self-sufficiency and frugality, I mean, it definitely takes a different way of thinking about work and retirement, doesn't it?
It totally does. Fisker challenges that traditional model where you work for 40 plus years and then you retire to, leisure and relaxation. He's got a different idea Work super hard for 5 to 10 years, save like crazy during that time, and then retire early to pursue your real passions.
So less about just retiring to sit on a beach all day, more about having that freedom to choose work that actually feels meaningful to you. You
Yeah.
know, like finally start that passion project you've always dreamed about. I feel like that's something a lot of people are really looking for these days.
Yeah, for sure. And to really get a grasp on how to prioritize your spending with this approach, Fisker breaks it down into 3 different levels. He starts with what he calls the consumer stage. And this is where a lot of people are, you're spending without much thought. Maybe you're living paycheck to paycheck, relying on conveniences instead of doing things yourself.
Oof. Yeah, I think a few of us have been there.
Right.
So what's the next level then?
Next is the working middle class. Now, folks here are cutting back on some of those unnecessary luxuries, but they're still spending on, wants rather than just needs.
So they're making an effort,
Yeah.
but maybe not quite embracing that extreme frugality just yet.
Right. And then there's the Renaissance level,
Yeah.
which Fisker really sees as the ideal. This is where spending is really minimized. The focus is on self-sufficiency, quality over quantity, sustainability.
Okay.
It's about rejecting that, keeping up with the Joneses mentality, and living a way that's simpler, more intentional.
That Renaissance level sounds pretty cool, actually. Is that connected at all to the idea of, like being a Renaissance person, like somebody who's skilled in all these different areas and not dependent on just one single job?
You know what? That's a great connection. Fisker actually encourages people to become like modern-day Renaissance people
Mm-hmm.
by learning a wide range of skills. Think of it as an investment in yourself that
Yeah.
gives you both, personal growth and practical advantages.
So like cooking, carpentry, gardening,
Right.
maybe even figuring out how to, generate some passive income.
Absolutely. The more you learn, the more adaptable you become
Mm-hmm.
and the more resilient you are,
Yeah.
especially in a world that's changing all the time.
Yeah, true.
Yeah,
And it ties back to that whole self-sufficiency thing, right?
exactly. The more you can do for yourself, the less you have to depend on other people.
Yeah.
And that gives you so much more freedom to shape your own life.
I'm really starting to see how all these different pieces fit together now. I mean, we've talked about a lot of the philosophy behind this early retirement extreme idea, but does Fisker actually lay out any concrete tools or strategies to, actually get to this level of financial independence?
Oh, he definitely does. And it all starts with this really simple formula that helps you calculate how long it will take you to retire based on your savings rate.
Okay, now this is where things get really interesting and practical. I'm guessing this all comes down to, the power of compound interest.
Bingo. Even just a small increase in your savings rate can make a huge difference in how fast you reach your financial goals. I mean, let's say you're saving 50% of your income right now.
Okay.
That would probably get you to retirement in about 17 years.
17 years are at,
But if you bump that up to 80%, you could be there in just 5 to 7 years.
wow. I mean, that's a big, big difference.
It is. So even if you can't hit that 80% target right away, every little bit extra that you save really does get you closer to that freedom.
Okay. But let's be real. I think a lot of us are kind of, stuck in that consumerism cycle that Fisker, really criticizes.
Mhm.
How do you actually, break free from that mindset?
Well, Fisker really pushes us to question those, societal norms around spending. He throws out these thought-provoking questions like,
Mm-hmm.
do you actually need to own a car? Or could you get around using public transport?
Mm-hmm.
Or a bike? Or do you need to eat out every single week? Or could you maybe cook more meals at home?
Yeah.
So it's all about really examining those assumptions we have about how we should be living. And you might be surprised at all the areas where you could reduce your spending without sacrificing your quality of life.
So basically, it's about consciously choosing how you want to live and spend your money instead of just kind of going along with what everybody else is doing.
Exactly. And that shift in mindset, it's really essential for reaching early retirement and designing a life that's truly free,
Mm-hmm.
a life that's full of purpose.
This is a lot to unpack, and I feel like we've only just scratched the surface.
I know, right?
So before we dive into, like the actual nuts and bolts of how to achieve this kind of radical retirement, what are your thoughts so far? Like, what's resonating with you the most?
I think what strikes me is how Fisker links financial independence to like personal fulfillment.
Okay, yeah.
It's not just about, having a big pile of money. It's about having the freedom to live a life that's truly aligned with what you value,
Mm.
with your passions.
Yeah. I mean, it's not just about escaping the 9 to 5,
Right.
right? It's about creating a life where you get to choose how you spend your time, where you have the time and the resources to chase your dreams.
Yeah, it's inspiring. What about you? What's standing out to you at this point?
Well, I think this whole idea of viewing life as a system that we were talking about, that's really powerful. It really makes you think about how like, everything is connected,
Hmm.
your finances, your time, how you use your skills, and it forces you to like look at all those areas where you might be wasting resources or energy and not even realize it. Yeah, that's a really good point. It's so easy to get caught up in those routines and those habits without even stopping to think like, is this actually working for me? Is this helping me? But let's get back to, like the more practical side of things. We've talked a lot about like the philosophy and the ideas, but how do you actually do this? Like how do you really live this early retirement extreme way of life? Where do you even start?
Well, Fisker actually gives you a pretty clear roadmap.
Yeah.
And the first step, he says, is understanding your current financial situation, like really understanding it. He's a big believer in, tracking every single dollar that you earn and every dollar that you
Yeah.
spend.
Hmm.
I know, it sounds kind of tedious,
Hmm.
but it's super important if you want to find those little sneaky expenses that can really drain your resources, those little things that add up over time.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people they just avoid budgeting altogether because they think it's going to be restrictive,
Yeah.
like it's all about deprivation. But that's not really how Fisker sees it, right?
Not at all. For him, budgeting is actually a tool that gives you more control. Once you understand your spending patterns, you can make better choices about where your money goes. You're in the driver's seat. Think of it like this. If you're trying to, lose weight, you'd want to track how many calories you're eating so you could figure out where to make adjustments. Budgeting is the same idea. It's all about awareness and making informed decisions.
Okay. I like that analogy. So once you have a good understanding of your spending, what's next?
Well, then it's time to, really embrace the extreme part of extreme frugality.
Uh-oh.
He suggests making some pretty big changes, like downsizing your housing, maybe getting rid of your car and using public transport or a bike, embracing minimalism and living with less stuff. These might seem like radical steps, but they can have a huge impact on how much money you're able to save.
Yeah, those are definitely some big lifestyle changes. But I guess that's kind of the whole point, right?
Yeah.
To break free from those conventional ideas about what it means to be successful and create a life that's more aligned with your values.
Right. And remember, these are just suggestions. You don't have to do everything exactly as Fisker says. The most important thing is to find what works for you. What works for your life and your circumstances.
Yeah.
Maybe downsizing means, moving to a smaller apartment or renting out a room in your house or even exploring some, co-living arrangements. Or maybe you figure out ways to, reduce your transportation costs by carpooling or biking or, even working remotely a few days a week.
So it's all about, finding that sweet spot,
Right.
where you're reducing your expenses without feeling like you're sacrificing your quality of life.
Yes, exactly. It's got to be sustainable. And while we've been talking a lot about, cutting back and spending less, Fisker doesn't want you to just focus on that. He also talks a lot about the importance of, maximizing your earning potential. So he suggests, maybe thinking about a career change or starting a side hustle during those intense saving years just to bring in some extra income.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, focusing only on saving, that can only take you so far. But if you can, increase your income at the same time, then you're really putting yourself in a powerful position. You're giving yourself more resources to reach those goals faster.
Exactly. And the key is, to resist lifestyle inflation even when you do get a raise. Or, you land that better paying job. You want to channel that extra income into your savings and investments, and that'll really, really accelerate your progress.
All right. So speaking of investments, does Fisker offer any, advice on how to invest wisely?
Yeah, he actually does. He recommends a pretty traditional approach, he calls it. Slow and steady wins the race. So he's a big fan of, low-cost index funds or dividend-paying stocks.
Yeah.
He's all about building that solid foundation for your financial future,
Mm-hmm.
you know, without getting caught up in, risky investments or chasing the latest, trends that you see online.
Right. Right. So it's about creating a sustainable plan that's going to, keep generating passive income over the long term. I get it. But I'm curious about something. I mean, we've covered, tracking spending, slashing expenses, boosting your income, investing wisely. But Fisker's approach, it seems to go, beyond just money, Like, how does he actually suggest we build a lifestyle that's going to support this whole financial independence thing?
Well, that's where, the idea of learning those essential life skills comes in. This is actually step 5 in his roadmap.
Hmm.
He's really passionate about, helping people develop self-reliance through practical skills like things like cooking, basic repairs, even gardening.
I love this part. It's like, tapping into your inner DIY superhero.
Right. And not only do these skills save you money, but they also give you this amazing sense of accomplishment, this feeling of, being able to take care of yourself. I imagine like growing your own vegetables in your backyard,
Hmm.
or fixing a leaky faucet all by yourself, or, just whipping up a delicious meal from scratch. These skills can turn those everyday tasks into something that's actually creative,
Yeah.
something you can learn from and enjoy. And they really can, enrich your life in so many ways that go beyond just money.
It's true. And it's a good reminder that, early retirement, it's not just about having, more money in the bank. It's
Yeah,
about having more time and more freedom to pursue the things that you actually care about.
exactly. And speaking of that, the final step in Fisker's roadmap is all about, living purposefully. He really emphasizes that retirement shouldn't be about idleness.
Yeah.
It should
Yeah.
be about pursuing those things that you're passionate about, those
Yeah.
hobbies or activities that you've always wanted to try, but maybe you haven't had the time for before.
So imagine like finally having the time and the freedom to, travel the world
Mm.
or write a novel or start a business or, even just volunteer in your community, whatever lights you up.
Right. It's about aligning your actions with your values and creating a life that really, really reflects who you are and what you care about. It's a powerful stuff.
It is. It's a powerful message, especially when, nowadays so many people are feeling stuck in jobs that they just don't enjoy.
Yeah.
Fisker offers a different way,
Yeah.
a path to freedom
Yeah.
and self-determination.
Yeah. I think that's the key. And it's important to remember that early retirement, it's not just some, far off dream. It's something that you can actually achieve if you have the right mindset, if you're committed, and if you have a good plan.
Okay. But all that being said, it's not always easy, right?
Right.
I mean, there are definitely going to be challenges that come with, trying to embrace a lifestyle like this, especially when we live in a society that kind of equates, success with how much stuff you have
Yeah.
and how much money you spend. So I'm curious, what are some of those biggest hurdles that people face when they, start going down this path? And how does Fisker suggest we, overcome them?
Yeah, I think social pressure can be a big one.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, it's tough to stick to your frugal habits when you see everybody around you spending, spending, spending.
Yeah.
It can feel like you're kind of swimming upstream
Yeah.
when your friends and family maybe don't really understand your choices.
Right.
Fisk have a couple of ideas for how to handle that. The first thing is to just keep reminding yourself of your goals.
Okay.
Keep that vision in mind of the financial freedom you're working towards and the life that you're designing for yourself.
Yeah.
The why behind all of it.
Right. Right.
And then the other thing is to find your tribe.
Okay.
Connect with other people who are on a similar path, who get it,
Yeah.
who are excited about frugality and financial independence.
Yeah. Find your people.
There are tons of people out there who are embracing this kind of lifestyle.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that can make a huge difference, just having that support system.
Yeah. Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
But, even with the best support system in the world, I bet there are still days when it's just hard to stay motivated,
Oh, for sure.
especially when you're making these sacrifices in the short term for, those long-term goals.
It's not always easy.
Yeah.
Fisker acknowledges that, that those first few years when you're really trying to save as much as possible, it takes a lot of discipline.
Yeah.
And you really got to keep that clear vision of where you're headed.
Right, right.
But he also points out that early retirement shouldn't be about deprivation. Should be about, aligning your spending with the things that you actually value.
Mm-hmm.
And the reward is that freedom and control,
Right.
that you get over your life when you're not tied to a job that you don't want to be doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like running a marathon or something.
Yeah.
You got to pace yourself and stay focused and keep remembering like why you started running in the first place.
That's a good analogy.
And just crossing that finish line. I mean, reaching early retirement, that's going to feel pretty amazing, right?
Absolutely. A huge sense of accomplishment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But okay, what about boredom? I mean, let's face it, living with fewer possessions, cutting back on like fancy entertainment and stuff, I mean, that could feel kind of limiting, right?
Sure, especially at first,
Yeah.
you know. But Fisker actually sees that potential boredom as an opportunity.
Okay. Yeah.
He wants people to look at it as a chance to grow, to discover new things.
Mm-hmm.
He encourages people to, learn new skills, explore those hobbies that they've always wanted to try, to find activities that they actually enjoy that don't cost a fortune.
Okay.
So instead of spending your weekend, shopping or binge watching TV, maybe you're learning a new language or
Right.
taking up photography
Yeah.
or volunteering in your community, something like that.
So it's about like shifting your focus, from just passively consuming stuff to like actually creating and engaging with the world.
Exactly.
That's got to be a lot more fulfilling.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to break the bank.
No, not at all.
I like it. So, I mean, this whole conversation, it's been a really fascinating deep dive, I think.
Yeah, it is.
We've talked about these core principles of early retirement extreme.
Mm-hmm.
We've looked at some of those practical steps to actually, make it happen.
Yeah.
And we've even, talked about some of the challenges,
Sure.
and how to deal with them.
How to overcome them.
So what are your big takeaways, from Fisker's work?
For me, it really comes back to that idea of connecting financial independence
Yeah.
with true personal fulfillment.
Yeah.
Fisker really forces us to question all those assumptions that we have about money and work and consumption, and it's a pretty radical approach.
It is.
But I think it's really powerful.
It's definitely thought-provoking.
Yeah.
So, if anybody listening to this is feeling inspired and they want to learn more about these ideas, I definitely recommend checking out Fisker's book.
It's a great resource.
It's full of, those practical tips and real-world stories of people who've actually done this.
Right.
They've achieved this early retirement thing through frugality and mindful living.
Inspiring stories.
And as you're, kind of starting on your own path, towards this financial independence,
Yeah.
remember that it really shouldn't feel like deprivation.
Yeah, absolutely not.
It's about making those choices that really align with your values and creating a life that truly reflects, who you are.
Yeah, a life that you're excited about.
So here's a final thought to kind of leave everybody with. If you could retire, let's say, in the next 5 to 10 years,
Okay.
what would you do? What are those passions that you would finally have the time and the freedom to chase?
Right.
What are those dreams? Take some time to think about that. And remember, I think the power to really design that ideal life, the life you really want, it's in your hands.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.